Filming. Elijah's tutorial video, take 1, action.
What's up, boys and ladies? Today we're gonna be wrapping the hood on this Civic. We're going in this super sick blue. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a 3M product. But what I would do first is give the hood an initial wipe down. Then you wanna do a clay bar, which just decontaminates, pulls all the rust spots and everything like that off of it. And then you wanna go over it one more time with iso alcohol. So what you're gonna wanna do is take your vinyl, lay it out, just like so. And I'm just pulling some of the backing back just to tack it instead of using like a magnet or something like that. So you wanna make sure you have full coverage on the whole thing. It's pretty centered. So I'm gonna go ahead, start from one of the corners that I tacked, lift that up, and I'm just gonna roll the backing underneath of it, get it started quite a bit. And as you can see, I'm kind of pulling it at an angle, and that's gonna help you in just a second. So I'm just gonna tack that top there so that doesn't move. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start at the edge of where I left it, lift this up a little bit, trying to keep this as flat as possible. And I'm just rolling it to this corner. And then I'll slowly just pull the whole thing across. So hopefully if you do it right, the vinyl shouldn't move too much as far as your placement. Boom. Sick. All right, so now that you got the backing pulled out from the vinyl, next thing you're gonna wanna do is, it's called glassing it out. You're basically eliminating all of these wrinkles, all this tension and everything is gonna go away. And you wanna do that before you even touch a squeegee to the vinyl. It's gonna make it a lot easier and it's gonna give you a lot cleaner outcome. So what I typically like to do is get it kind of in a good positioning. You don't want like any super big wrinkles in it when you start. So I'll typically start at one of the top corners, and I haven't tacked anything. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this way, and I'm not really gonna worry about pulling, up any at all. So I'm gonna lift it up, and I'm simply just pulling like that. And then same right here is, see what happens when I just give it a little bit of tension? It's getting rid of everything right here. So I'm just gonna, again, pull. And I'm not pulling super hard because I don't need to. I'm kind of just, it's called reading the wrinkles. I'm kind of just pulling just hard enough to where the wrinkles are disappearing. So then same thing on this side. Gonna pop it up, get that little bit that was tacked, and then boom. Last one. And on these bottom portions, you're gonna have to read these wrinkles and these, because if you're not pulling hard enough this way, you're gonna have some slack right here that you're gonna have to deal with later on. And then same thing going this way. So you kind of want to pull right towards you, and boom. So now that you got all that, get some of your squeegee juice. Typically when I'm wrapping anything, I always start on the high spots, because oftentimes, where's my glove? Oftentimes the high spots will get missed. The high spots will get missed. So on this hood, and on a lot of hoods, there's typically 2 body lines coming from the edges and then coming towards the center of the hood. So I actually start there, and I'll simply just, I'm using a glove, You could use a squeegee, whatever you want. And I'm just hitting those high spots first. That way I know I won't forget them. I'll just do that on both sides. Got a little wrinkle right there. That's fine. All right, so now that I got both those done, all I have to do really is just squeegee everything else. So I'm just gonna spray some of this squeegee juice on there. And I'm just gonna go straight across, and then I'll kinda go in a little bit and just work my way to the top. And you want to make sure you're overlapping about 50% each time to make sure you don't get any bubbles and miss anything. And then as far as pressure, I'm not pushing too hard. You'll kind of find a good pressure to use as you go. But so that top part's done. Same thing on this bottom. See, and because I glassed it so well, I don't have to heat anything. I haven't touched heat on this hood one time, and I'm not gonna have any issues as I'm squeegeeing. A lot of people run into issues right here because they didn't stretch enough this way, or whatever. I forgot what I was gonna say, but all right, so before I make any cuts on this hood, I'm gonna get rid of some of this excess material so that it's a little easier to tuck. So I'm not heating it up a ton. I'm just barely hitting it with heat just so it kind of relaxes. And then once it just kind of falls down, I'll just take my finger and then roll this around the edge. And you don't want to go too far under rolling it around because then it'll kind of stick to the bottom, and then trying to cut it will be a mess. So now this should be ready to cut. And when you cut, you're just gonna take your blade. You barely want any out. It's like a couple clicks out if you can't see that. And I just kind of start in the middle, and I'm just gliding my blade across the edge. And I'm not turning my blade into the hood because then you'll be cutting it. I'm just gliding it parallel to the edge of the hood. And then on these side cuts, what I do is I bridge it along the fender just like this, and then take some heat to it. And you want it to be as flat as possible. If you have any wrinkles in there, it'll make the cut look worse. So I just heat it, run my finger across it to make it look good. I'll do it on the other side real quick. Make it all look uniform as possible. And then what I'm gonna do is snap a blade, and I'm just gonna run my blade along the fender side.
One sec. Cut. All right, cut that shit.
Sorry. Oh, good. I'm just gonna run my blade across the fender side. Again, I'm not pushing into the fender. I'm more just using it as a guide And then I'll end it right at this corner right here. Just cut off that excess. And you never want to cut on headlights or taillights or any sort of clear plastic. I don't care how good your blade pressure is. There's always a chance that you could scratch it. And I don't know if you've seen prices on headlights or taillights, but they're typically not super cheap unless you're an eBay freak. And then I leave a little bit of excess on the corners so I could play with those a little bit if I need to.
All right.
Redoing the whole thing?
Yep, redo that whole thing.
All right, so now that both the sides are cut, the top is cut and tucked. I haven't tucked any of the sides yet. I leave those alone. So now you're gonna wanna pop the hood, and we're gonna work on the front section now. So if you can't see, I cut off a bunch of the excess because I didn't need it. So what you're gonna wanna do, grab your heat gun. I typically just go over the whole thing one time to make sure there's not any weird areas of tension. I'm kind of just letting it relax on itself. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit all my corners. All I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna pull it or anything. I'm just using heat so it forms around it a little better. So I'm just using my thumb and rolling it right around that edge, and then I'll follow it up. Same thing on this corner. Again, not stretching at all, just touching it with heat and letting it form around the corner. So then, on this hood, there's like a little gasket, like a weather gasket. So I'm not gonna tuck it under to the little weld or whatever you wanna call it. And the reason why I'm pulling down a little bit on this is to get rid of this line right here. It'll make it a little easier to tuck, but I'm not really stretching it again. So then go across the whole hood. It is ready to cut. You wanna go over one more time, make sure everything's tucked nice and everything. But what I do is I'll just start at where I left off with the side of the hood and just start it right at one corner. And you wanna cut it basically how you cut the rest of the hood. Just gliding your blade along the underside edge, and you don't want to stop on the corners. It'll give you a not as pretty corner. There'll be a little edge or lip on it, and you just want to cut this. And I do have a little more blade out for some cuts, but I'm only using maybe an eighth of it. That's kind of pushing it, but the reason why I do that is it's a little easier for me to see where my blade's going. Some people could get away with only having like one or two clicks out on all cuts, but I like to see where my blade's going. So that is all cut. Now you're just gonna wanna go over all your edges and wrap everything around. You'll just roll those around, tucking these. I still haven't touched my corners. That's typically the last things I do. So I'm just making sure everything's down right now. Nothing's coming back up. Time to come back up to these corners. This is the last step that I typically do. And now I'm just gonna give it one last touch of heat. Let that cool down. You don't wanna cut vinyl when it's hot because it turns into like a rubber band and you're not gonna be cutting it real nice. So looks like both of those are good. I'm gonna go back over to that one because it's a little cooler. And all I'm gonna do is run my blade across the bottom side of the hood, tuck it under, and that one is done. Do the same thing to this side. Maybe some corners on different makes of cars, it kind of depends, can be ugly from factory. I don't know why. But there you go. Now you're just gonna wanna make sure, again, nothing's gonna come back up. I'm just gonna hit those one more time. I'm gonna get them a little hotter this time to kind of post heat. I think my squeegee, my thumb's too big. All right, that one looks good. Finish up this side. And there you go. So the hood is complete. I hope that helped you guys out a little bit, and we will see you on the next video.